Tommy Chen had logged 4,000 dives in 22 years, but none prepared him for this. 900 feet below the Indian Ocean, a valve failure severed his umbilical line. Comms dead. Oxygen reading 47 minutes. No rescue for 6 hours. His only chance, short-circuit his submersible's electrical system, risking instant explosion to reach the emergency pod 200 feet away through black water where pressure crushes steel. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tommy Chen's hands moved through the pre-dive checklist the same way they had for 22 years. 3 checks on the oxygen regulator, 2 pressure tests on the suit seals, 1 final inspection of the umbilical connection points. The equipment room on Platform 7 smelled like diesel fuel and salt water. He'd been up since 4:30, same as always, coffee and 2 pieces of toast before anyone else stirred. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, 24 years old and eager as a puppy. The kid had been diving for 8 months and still looked at Tommy like he held the secrets to the universe. "Morning, old man. Heard you're heading down to Valve Cluster 7 today." "That's the job," Tommy said, cinching the torso seal on his pressure suit. The fabric was thick, reinforced, rated for 1,000 feet. He'd be working at 900. Plenty of margin. Marcus leaned against the equipment rack. "Jenkins said there were some weird readings on the subsystem monitors last night. Pressure fluctuations or something? You worried?" Tommy glanced at the maintenance log clipped to the wall. Someone had scrawled "minor anomaly, investigate," next to yesterday's readings. He'd seen 100 minor anomalies. 99 turned out to be sensor glitches. "Fluctuations happen. That's why we do maintenance." "Yeah, but Marcus, you want to know the secret to staying alive down there?" Tommy pulled his helmet off the rack, checked the seal gasket. "Respect the ocean. Follow the protocols. Don't overthink the job." He tapped the kid's chest. "And don't let your imagination kill you before the pressure does." Marcus grinned. "Got it." "Hey, what was your closest call? You never talk about it." Tommy paused. There had been a moment in the Gulf of Mexico, 15 years back, when a thruster died and left him drifting toward an oil pipeline. He'd had maybe 10 seconds to grab a fixed line before the current swept him into equipment that would have crushed his submersible like tinfoil. But he didn't tell war stories. "Closest call was the time I forgot to pack lunch and had to eat Jenkins' tuna sandwich. Thought I was going to die." Marcus laughed. Tommy finished his equipment check and headed for the dive bell. The sun wasn't up yet, just the first gray suggestion of dawn on the horizon. The Indian Ocean stretched flat and black in every direction, 12,000 feet deep in some spots. Platform 7 sat above a relatively shallow section, 900 feet, a routine depth for a routine job. The rig supervisor, Patterson, met him at the bell. "Chen, you saw the subsystem notes." "Saw them. It's probably nothing, but keep an eye out. If anything looks off, you abort and come back up. We can reschedule." Tommy nodded. He'd aborted dives before for good reasons. Gas leaks, equipment malfunctions, weather turning bad. But he'd also learned that half the time, aborting meant another crew had to go down anyway. "If it's a problem, I'll call it. Otherwise, I'll have your valve fixed by lunch." Patterson clapped his shoulder. "That's why you're the guy we send." Tommy climbed into the dive bell, sealed the hatch behind him, and gave the thumbs up through the porthole. The winch engaged with a mechanical groan. The bell began its descent, and the surface lights of Platform 7 started to fade above him, swallowed by 900 feet of black water that didn't care how many dives he'd logged or how confident he felt. The descent took 12 minutes. Tommy watched the depth gauge climb, 100 feet, 200, 500. His ears popped twice despite the pressurization. Outside the porthole, the water shifted from blue-green to deep blue to something approaching black. At 300 feet, the last traces of sunlight disappeared. The bell's external lights carved a small sphere of visibility in the absolute darkness, maybe 15 feet in any direction. Beyond that, nothing. At 700 feet, bioluminescent creatures started appearing, tiny jellyfish drifting past like underwater stars. A school of lanternfish with glowing bellies scattered as the bell pushed through them. Tommy had seen it thousands of times, but it never stopped being strange. The bell shuddered slightly as it passed 800 feet. Normal. Tommy checked his suit one more time. All seals green, oxygen reading 6 hours, comms showing strong signal to the surface. His umbilical line lay coiled beside him, ready to connect once he transferred to the submersible. That line was everything. Power for his tools, hot water circulation to keep him from freezing, emergency backup oxygen, and the communications link that kept him tethered to the living world above. 900 feet. The bell settled onto its docking cradle with a metallic clang. Through the porthole, Tommy could see the underwater rig structure, a massive maze of pipes, valves, and support columns extending in every direction. The valve cluster he needed to service was 200 feet from the bell, easily visible in the mounted floodlights. Surface, this is Chen. I'm at depth. Beginning transfer to Pod 7. Patterson's voice crackled through the speaker. Copy that, Chen. Weather's clear topside. You've got a 4-hour window before the next shift. More than enough time. Tommy opened the inner hatch and moved into the transfer chamber. Pod 7 sat in its dock, a one-man submersible that looked like a miniature submarine crossed with a deep-sea research vessel. Reinforced viewing dome, 2 mechanical arms for precision work, 4 directional thrusters for movement. Tommy had been using Pod 7 for 3 years. He knew every quirk, every sound it made. He climbed in, sealed the hatch, and connected his umbilical line to the pod systems. Immediate warmth flooded through his suit as the hot water circulation kicked in. The temperature at 900 feet hovered just above freezing. Without the heated water running through channels in his suit, hypothermia would set in within an hour. Tommy ran through the pod startup sequence. Thrusters responded smoothly. Mechanical arms flexed properly. External lights showed full power. He undocked from the bell and used a gentle thruster burst to move toward the valve cluster. The pod responded perfectly. Surface, I'm mobile. Approaching the worksite now. Copy. We're showing all your systems nominal from up here. Tommy maneuvered around a vertical support column, careful not to let the umbilical line snag on anything. The valve cluster came into view, a junction point where 6 major pipes converged, each one as thick as a car. One of the valves showed visible corrosion around its seal. That would be his target. Then he saw something that made him pause. A hairline fracture in the support coupling directly above the valve cluster. It wasn't in the maintenance report. It should have been. Tommy brought Pod 7 to a hover 3 feet from the coupling. He adjusted the external lights, focusing the beam on the fracture. It ran vertically for about 8 inches, a dark line in the metal that looked like cracked ice. The coupling bore the weight of the entire valve assembly above it. Thousands of pounds of pressure and stress concentrated on a single point. Surface, I've got a problem. Support coupling Delta 7 has a visible fracture. 8 inches, vertical orientation. It's not in the maintenance log. Static crackled for a moment. Then Patterson's voice came back. Can you get a photo? Tommy positioned the pod's camera and snapped 3 images from different angles. Sending them now. 30 seconds passed. The coupling made a sound, a faint metallic ping that Tommy felt more than heard. Metal under stress. His instinct screamed at him to back away. Patterson came back on. We're seeing the images. Engineering says it's probably been there for months. Thermal expansion and contraction causes hairline fractures in these couplings all the time. Document it in your report and proceed with the valve maintenance. Tommy stared at the fracture. Probably been there for months. Probably. Patterson, that coupling is directly above my work site. If it fails while I'm under it. Chen, we've got pressure readings on that coupling. It's well within tolerance. The fracture is cosmetic. We'll add it to next month's inspection list, but right now we need that valve serviced. We're losing pressure in the whole cluster. Cosmetic. Tommy had seen cosmetic fractures before. They didn't make that pinging sound, but Patterson was looking at computer readouts from the surface. Tommy was looking at the actual structure 900 feet down where pressure and cold did things to metal that engineers in warm offices couldn't predict. He could abort. Protocol allowed it. Any diver who felt unsafe could call off the dive. No questions asked. He'd done it twice in 22 years. Once for a gas leak, once for equipment failure. Both times had been the right call. But both times, another diver had gone down the next day to finish the job. Usually Marcus these days. And if Tommy aborted over a fracture that engineering said was fine, Marcus would be the one working under that coupling tomorrow. Copy surface. Proceeding with valve maintenance. Tommy moved Pod 7 into position beneath the coupling. He extended the mechanical arms and pulled his toolkit from the storage compartment. The valve seal needed to be removed, cleaned, inspected, and replaced. 45 minutes of work if everything went smoothly. He positioned the socket wrench on the first bolt. The coupling pinged again, louder this time. Tommy paused, wrench in place, every instinct telling him this was wrong. Then he thought of Marcus, and he started turning the bolt. 22 years of experience told him the engineering numbers were probably right. 22 years of experience also told him that probably was a word that killed people in his profession. The bolt came free. He moved to the second one. Above him, invisible in the darkness beyond his lights, that fracture continued doing whatever fractures did under 900 feet of ocean pressure. The second bolt resisted. Tommy applied more torque, feeling the mechanical arms strain against the corroded threads. The wrench slipped once, twice, then caught and began turning, the kind of maintenance that kept oil flowing and platforms operational. The bolt came free with a metallic squeal. Tommy set it aside and moved to the third bolt. 4 bolts total to remove the protective housing. 20 minutes into the job. Right on schedule. That's when he heard the crack. Not a ping this time. A sharp explosive sound like a gunshot echoing through water. Tommy looked up and saw the fracture spreading. The hairline split, widening, branching, spider-webbing across the coupling surface. The coupling wasn't failing slowly. It was failing now. Surface, abort, abort, abort. Coupling is failing. The coupling gave way. 3 tons of valve assembly tore free and dropped. Tommy had maybe half a second to react. He slammed the thruster controls, trying to move Pod 7 laterally, but the umbilical line caught on something. The pod jerked to a halt. The falling debris missed the pod by inches and slammed into the umbilical line instead. The line severed instantly. Tommy watched it happen. His lifeline to the surface cut cleanly in 2, both ends whipping away into the darkness. The pod's interior went dark as external power died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. Alarms started screaming. Surface, do you copy? Surface. Static. Dead air. Tommy's hands moved automatically, checking systems. Main power coupling, sheared. External lights, dead. Hot water circulation, offline. Communications, offline. Port thruster, damaged, maybe destroyed by debris impact. His oxygen gauge read 4 hours and 12 minutes. Internal supply only. The pod's battery power showed maybe 2 hours of auxiliary function. Enough for minimal lighting, minimal life support, maybe 1 working thruster. Tommy forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic used oxygen. He'd trained for catastrophic failures, run simulations, studied emergency protocols. But simulations happened in swimming pools with instructors watching. This was 900 feet of black ocean with no one coming to help. The emergency protocol was clear. In the event of umbilical failure with no communications, the diver was to shelter in place. Surface would wait 6 hours before attempting rescue. 6 hours was standard procedure. Tommy checked his oxygen gauge again. 4 hours, 11 minutes. He'd be dead 2 hours before anyone came looking. The emergency pod sat 200 feet away, around 2 major support structures and through a maze of pipes. That pod had a week's worth of oxygen and a direct satellite beacon that would bring rescue within hours. 200 feet. In normal conditions, Pod 7 could cover that distance in 3 minutes, but normal conditions included 4 working thrusters and external lights. Now he had maybe 1 thruster, emergency lighting that barely penetrated 10 feet, and battery power that wouldn't last. Tommy stared at the auxiliary power readings, then at the main power coupling. Damaged but not destroyed. An idea formed. Dangerous, probably stupid. Definitely against every safety protocol he'd ever learned. If he could short-circuit the auxiliary power through the main systems, he might get enough juice to reach the emergency pod. The battery could also explode from thermal overload, which at 900 feet would crush the pod instantly. Tommy pulled the access panel off the power distribution system. His hands shook from cold. The hot water circulation had been offline for 10 minutes, and the ocean's chill was already seeping through his suit. Without heat, hypothermia would start affecting his judgment within an hour. The wiring harness looked like a nightmare of color-coded cables and junction boxes. Tommy had repaired Pod 7's electrical system twice before, both times on the surface with proper tools and lighting. He needed to route auxiliary power through the main power trunk. The problem was safety limiters. They existed to prevent what he was about to do, because forcing too much current through underrated systems created heat. Heat created thermal runaway. Thermal runaway created an explosion. His toolkit contained wire strippers, electrical tape, and a circuit tester. Tommy stripped the insulation from both lines, exposing copper wire. His fingers felt clumsy. The cold was affecting his dexterity. He twisted the wires together, main and auxiliary, creating a junction that would make any electrical engineer have a heart attack. This was forcing 12 volts through a system designed for 24. The battery temperature gauge read 38 degrees Celsius. If this worked, that number would climb fast. 70 degrees meant he had maybe 60 seconds before thermal runaway turned Pod 7 into his coffin. Tommy wrapped electrical tape around the exposed junction. His breath fogged the inside of his helmet. The pod's interior temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. The oxygen gauge read 3 hours, 54 minutes. He had one chance at this. If the short circuit worked, he'd have maybe 15 minutes of full power. If it failed, he'd blow his only power source and die in the dark with 3 hours of oxygen left to think about it. Tommy positioned his hand on the bypass switch. Just a bare wire he'd have to touch to the junction. Every safety instructor he'd ever had was screaming in his head. Every protocol manual said this was suicide. "Sorry, Sophie," he whispered. His wife had made him promise to always choose the safe option. He'd kept that promise for 22 years, but the safe option here was waiting to die. He took one deep breath, 3 hours and 52 minutes remaining, and touched the wire to the junction. The pod's electrical system screamed to life. Main power surged through every circuit. External lights blazed on. The thruster assembly hummed with sudden energy. The navigation display flickered, stabilized, showed a clear route to the emergency pod. Tommy checked the battery temperature. 45 degrees. Climbing. He had maybe 10 minutes before the whole thing exploded. Tommy fired the thrusters and Pod 7 lurched forward. The damaged port thruster sputtered, making the pod pull hard to the left. He compensated with the starboard thruster, manual control only. The pod moved like a car with a blown tire, but it moved. The external lights revealed the underwater structure, pipes covered in algae, support beams crusted with barnacles, schools of fish scattering. Tommy navigated around a vertical column, 170 feet to the emergency pod. Battery temperature, 48 degrees. He pushed harder. The navigation system showed a clear path between two massive pipes, a shortcut that would save 30 seconds. Tommy aimed for the gap and saw the problem. A tangle of cables hanging in the water, remnants of old maintenance work. He was moving too fast to stop. The pod hit the cables at full speed. They wrapped around the viewing dome, blocking his vision. Tommy felt something snag on the mechanical arms. He reversed thrust, but the damaged port thruster seized completely. The pod spun sideways. Battery temperature, 52 degrees. The smell of burning electronics filled the pod. Tommy shut down the port thruster and relied on the starboard alone, pulsing it in short bursts. The cables scraped across the dome. He couldn't see anything. He extended the mechanical arms and grabbed at the cables. The right arm closed on a thick bundle and yanked. The cables snapped. The pod had rotated 90 degrees and he was facing a massive support pylon 6 feet away. Moving straight toward it, he fired the starboard thruster at maximum. The pod veered, missing the pylon by inches. The mechanical arms scraped against concrete, throwing sparks. Tommy fought for control, nearly slamming into a pipe. The pod stabilized finally, pointing in completely the wrong direction. Battery temperature, 55 degrees, rising faster. Tommy checked the display. He'd lost 40 feet of progress and was now 180 feet from the emergency pod. He drifted into a section he didn't recognize. The main path was blocked. The display showed two options. The direct route went through a narrow gap between two massive tanks, maybe 4 feet of clearance. The alternate route swung wide, adding 60 feet. safe but slow. Battery temperature, 58 degrees. He could smell insulation melting. The direct route. He'd spent 22 years navigating tight spaces. 4 feet of clearance was plenty. He aimed for the gap and pushed the thruster to maximum. The pod accelerated. The gap approached. Tommy realized too late that the tanks weren't parallel. They angled inward. The gap was 4 feet wide at the entrance, but narrowed to maybe 3 feet at the far end. Pod 7 was 3.5 feet wide. Battery temperature, 61 degrees. He aimed for the center and didn't slow down. The pod scraped through the gap with a grinding screech of metal on metal. Tommy felt the hull compress, heard rivets popping. The viewing dome cracked, not shattered, but a hairline split appeared across the reinforced glass. Water didn't come through. Not yet. But the crack was there, a reminder that the dome was rated for 1,000 feet, and he was already at 900 with a compromised structure. Battery temperature, 64 degrees. Tommy cleared the gap and checked his position. 120 feet to the emergency pod. The navigation display flickered, went dark for 2 seconds, then came back. The electrical system was failing. He could hear the bypass junction sizzling behind the access panel, the improvised connection burning through its insulation. The pod's interior temperature had dropped to 4 degrees. Tommy's teeth chattered. His fingers felt wooden on the controls. Hypothermia was setting in faster now, dulling his reactions, making everything feel distant and dreamlike. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now. This story takes time to craft. If you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The pod scraped through the gap with a grinding screech. Tommy felt the hull compress, heard rivets popping. The viewing dome cracked. A hairline split across the reinforced glass. Battery temperature, 64 degrees. 120 feet to the emergency pod. The navigation display flickered, went dark, then came back. The pod's interior had dropped to 4 degrees. Tommy's teeth chattered. The external lights dimmed, flickered, came back at half brightness. Visibility dropped to 10 feet. Battery temperature, 67 degrees. The thruster started grinding. Tommy reduced thrust. The pod slowed to a crawl. Oxygen gauge, 3 hours, 28 minutes. A support column appeared ahead. Tommy yanked the controls. He missed it by 2 feet. Battery temperature, 69 degrees. Smoke seeped from the access panel. 70 feet to the emergency pod. The navigation display died. Battery temperature, 70 degrees. The thruster shuddered, then died. Pod 7 went silent except for breathing and crackling wires. 20 feet, 15, 10. Then Tommy saw it. The emergency pod, 40 feet ahead. 5 feet of momentum remaining. Tommy unsealed his harness and moved to the hatch. He initiated equalization. The gauge climbed. 300 psi, 350, 400. Equalized. Tommy grabbed the manual release and pulled. The hatch swung open and the cold hit him. 2 degrees above freezing. He pulled himself into the water. The pressure suit added 60 pounds. Tommy kicked hard. His suit light provided 5 feet of visibility. 35 feet to go. Tommy's legs burned. 3 hours, 23 minutes of oxygen. 30 feet. Something brushed his leg. Tommy kicked harder. 25 feet. His muscles seized. His kick became weaker. 20 feet. Tommy's vision tunneled. He kept swimming. 1 arm forward, pull, kick, breathe. 15 feet, 10 feet. He could see the hexagonal hatch. His hand cramped into a claw. 5 feet. His legs stopped working. 3 feet from the hatch. Tommy forced his hand forward. He jabbed at the pod. His knuckles hit metal. The impact pushed him backward. He exhaled hard, using the air to create thrust. His hand touched the hatch. He hooked his wrist around the handle. The manual release required turning a wheel 45 degrees. Tommy grabbed it, pulled. Nothing. Ice had locked it. Tommy slammed his fist against the wheel. Again. The wheel shifted. Tommy threw his body weight into turning it. The wheel turned. 5 degrees, 10, 15, 3 hours, 18 minutes of oxygen, 20 degrees, 30. His right hand slipped. Tommy grabbed with his left. The wheel turned the final 15 degrees and locked. The hatch released. He pushed it open. Tommy grabbed the frame and pulled himself in. His head passed through. Then his shoulders. He dragged himself inside. His waist cleared. His hips. His legs came last. Tommy reached back and grabbed the hatch. Pulled it closed. The seal engaged. Tommy lay on the floor. Emergency systems kicked in. Lights came on. Heat began flowing. The temperature gauge read 8 degrees and climbing. Oxygen gauge. 3 hours, 14 minutes. Then he remembered the beacon. Tommy forced his eyes open. Far wall. 3 feet away. Tommy tried to move his right arm. Nothing happened. His arm twitched. Tommy rolled onto his side. Took 30 seconds. He used his left arm to drag himself forward, 6 inches. He dragged himself another 6 inches. 2 feet to go. Tommy dragged forward, 18 inches now. His left arm gave out. He tried his right arm. This time it moved, barely. Tommy focused on his right arm. His hand scraped across the floor. 4 inches, 6 inches. The switch was a foot away. His heart rate was slowing, becoming irregular. Tommy stretched his arm. His shoulder popped. 8 inches from the switch. He planted his left elbow, pushed. His body shifted an inch. He pushed again. Black spots danced. He pushed a third time. 6 inches from the switch. Tommy stretched his right arm past the pane. His fingers touched plastic. The beacon housing. He walked his fingers up. The toggle switch. He pressed down. The switch clicked. A green LED lit up. The beacon was active. Tommy's arm dropped. The temperature gauge read 14 degrees and climbing. Tommy lay watching the beacon light pulse. Each blink meant the signal was transmitting. Fast response was 3 hours. He checked his oxygen gauge. 3 hours, 11 minutes. If rescue came in 3 hours, he'd have 11 minutes left. The temperature gauge read 16 degrees. Tommy's shivering had intensified. Tommy forced himself to move. He rolled onto his back. He tried to bend his right knee. The leg responded barely. Tommy reached for the supply locker and pulled it open. Inside, emergency rations, water bottles, a medical kit, thermal blankets. He grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around himself. He grabbed a water bottle and tried to open it. He used his teeth. The water was ice cold, but he drank it. Tommy checked his dive computer, 7:43 a.m. He'd been underwater for an hour and 26 minutes. On the surface, Patterson would be panicking. Marcus was probably volunteering to go down. Patterson would tell him no. Tommy wondered if they'd find Pod 7. They'd recover it, analyze the failure. The fracture would be mentioned. He didn't regret it. If he'd aborted, Marcus would have gone down the next day. The oxygen gauge read 3 hours, 8 minutes. If rescue took 4 hours, he'd be cutting it close. Tommy closed his eyes and practiced the breathing technique. 4 seconds in. Hold for 4. 4 seconds out. Hold for 4. The pod's heating hummed. Temperature gauge read 18 degrees. Tommy could feel his fingers again. Tommy pulled the medical kit from the supply locker. Inside, pressure bandages, pain medication, emergency stimulants. He found a chemical heat pack. Tommy bent it and felt it start warming. He tucked it inside his suit against his chest. His hands were working better now. He could flex his fingers, make a fist. Tommy checked his extremities for frostbite. Fingers looked okay, red and painful, but no black spots. The oxygen gauge read 3 hours, 4 minutes. Tommy did the calculations. He was burning approximately 20 liters per minute. That gave him 180 liters remaining. If he could drop consumption to 15 liters per minute, he'd stretch his supply to 4 hours. Tommy focused on his breathing. His heart rate dropped from 70 beats per minute to 60. The temperature inside the pod had reached 22 degrees. Tommy unwrapped himself from the thermal blanket and checked his suit for damage. The seals looked intact. Tommy looked at the viewport. Black water pressed against the glass. Nothing visible except darkness. Tommy checked his dive computer. 7:51 a.m. 8 minutes since he'd activated the beacon. Rescue had received his signal. The oxygen gauge read 3 hours, 1 minute. Tommy's breathing was under control. He was consuming maybe 16 liters per minute. He could maintain this for hours. Tommy opened an emergency ration pack. Inside was a protein bar that tasted like cardboard. He forced himself to eat it. His body needed calories to fight the hypothermia. The bar was hard to swallow, but he got it down with water. He examined the beacon housing more closely. The green LED blinked every 3 seconds. The unit was broadcasting on emergency frequency 121, 5 MHz and 406 MHz simultaneously. Both frequencies meant redundancy. Tommy checked the beacon's battery indicator, full charge. The unit could broadcast for a week. The pod's heating had raised the temperature to 24 degrees. Tommy was shivering less. His core temperature was climbing back toward normal. He estimated he was at maybe 34 degrees Celsius, still hypothermic, but survivable. The oxygen gauge read 2 hours, 57 minutes. Tommy had been in the emergency pod for 17 minutes. It felt like hours. He wondered what the investigation would conclude. Probably operator error. Tommy had seen the fracture and continued working. That was a judgment call. The coupling had been rated as safe by engineering. The failure was catastrophic and unpredictable. Tommy had handled it. He'd short-circuited his submersible, swum 40 feet at 900 feet depth, forced open a frozen hatch with hypothermia shutting down his muscles. He'd done everything right after everything went wrong. The beacon blinked. On, off, on, off. Tommy closed his eyes and listened to his breathing. 4 seconds in, hold. 4 seconds out, hold. Each breath was a victory. He thought about Marcus finding out what happened. The kid would blame himself somehow. Tommy would have to set him straight. This wasn't Marcus's fault. Sometimes equipment failed. Sometimes the ocean won. Today, Tommy hadn't let it win. Not yet, anyway. Tommy pulled out the hypothermia treatment card from the medical kit and read through the recovery protocols. Stage 3 hypothermia, core temperature between 32 and 35 degrees Celsius. Symptoms: severe shivering, loss of coordination, confusion, drowsiness. Treatment: gradual rewarming, warm fluids, monitor cardiac rhythm. He was checking all the boxes. The card warned against rapid rewarming. It could cause cardiac arrest. The body needed time to adjust. Tommy was doing it right, slow and steady. The pod's heating system was designed for exactly this scenario, programmed to raise temperature gradually over an hour. He looked at the emergency contact information printed on the pod's wall. Platform 7 surface contact, Plowern 991 98 4567 2100. Rescue coordination, Plowern 991 98 4567 2200. He'd memorized those numbers years ago, back when he first started working deep water. Never thought he'd need them like this. Tommy checked his suit's internal temperature sensor. It read 12 degrees at his core. Still dangerously low, but rising. 10 minutes ago, it had been 8 degrees. Progress. Measurable, concrete progress. That's what mattered in survival situations. Not hope or prayer, but numbers you could track, improvements you could measure. Tommy lay on the emergency pod floor watching the beacon blink. 2 hours, 53 minutes of oxygen remaining. Rescue needed to arrive before his air ran out, or none of this mattered. He checked the beacon's transmission indicator. Solid green. The signal was broadcasting strong. Standard deep water rescue protocol meant they'd send down a 2-man submersible with medical equipment and emergency oxygen. 30 minutes to prep, another hour to descend. Add 30 minutes for safety margins. 2 hours total if everything went perfectly. Tommy had never seen anything go perfectly at 900 feet. The temperature gauge read 26 degrees. His core body temperature was climbing, but slowly. Tommy pulled the thermal blanket tighter and activated a second chemical heat pack. He pressed it against his abdomen. His internal organs needed heat more than his extremities. He tried moving his legs. The right leg responded, bending maybe 4 inches. Better than before. The left leg barely moved. Tommy massaged his left thigh through the pressure suit. The muscle felt like frozen meat. The oxygen gauge dropped to 2 hours, 51 minutes. Tommy was breathing too fast. He forced himself to slow down. 4 seconds in. Hold. 4 seconds out. Hold. His heart rate dropped from 75 to 65. Tommy heard something outside. A metallic creaking that echoed through the water. He froze, listening. The sound came again. Sharp, deliberate, rhythmic. He pulled himself up to the viewport and looked out. The small window showed nothing but black water in the faint glow of the pod's exterior marker lights. The creaking sound came again, closer. Tommy's first thought was the rig structure settling, but the sound was wrong. Too regular, too purposeful. Then he saw it, a shape moving at the edge of visibility, large, maybe 6 feet long, gliding through the water with deliberate movements. Tommy pressed his face against the viewport. The shape circled the pod once, staying just beyond the reach of the lights. He caught a glimpse of something pale. Then it was gone. The creaking sound stopped. Tommy waited, barely breathing. Nothing moved. The water outside was still and black. He told himself it didn't matter. He was inside the pod, sealed and safe. The pod's hull was reinforced steel. Nothing out there could get to him. But his hands shook as he moved away from the viewport. The oxygen gauge read 2 hours, 48 minutes. Tommy checked the beacon. Still transmitting. Still green. Rescue was coming, and hoped that whatever was circling outside decided to leave him alone. Tommy forced himself to look away from the viewport. Whatever was out there didn't matter. He had more immediate problems. The oxygen gauge read 2 hours, 46 minutes, and his core temperature was still only 34 degrees. But the creaking sound came back. Louder, metal groaning under stress. Tommy felt it through the floor, a vibration that traveled up through his body. Something outside was touching the pod. He crawled back to the viewport. The shape was there again, closer. Tommy could see it clearly. A 6-gill shark, maybe 8 feet long, its prehistoric body covered in gray-brown skin. The shark circled the pod slowly, its snout brushing against the hull. The metal creaked each time the shark made contact. Tommy exhaled. Just a shark. Deep water sharks were common around oil rigs. They were attracted to the vibrations, the electrical fields. The pod's beacon was probably drawing it in. 6-gills weren't aggressive toward humans, but this one kept circling, kept bumping the pod, testing it. The shark's eye appeared in the viewport, black, dead, reflecting the light. Then it moved away. Tommy checked his dive computer. 8:17 a.m. He'd been in the emergency pod for 26 minutes. Rescue wouldn't arrive for at least another hour and a half. The pod was designed to withstand pressure at this depth. A shark couldn't damage it. The rational part of Tommy's brain knew this. The oxygen gauge read 2 hours, 43 minutes. Tommy realized he was breathing faster again. The shark was making him nervous. He forced himself back to the breathing rhythm. The pod's heating system hummed. Temperature gauge read 28 degrees. Tommy was warming up, but his left leg still wouldn't respond. He grabbed the emergency medical kit and found instant glucose tablets. Low blood sugar made hypothermia worse. He popped 3 tablets in his mouth. The shark bumped the pod again. Harder. The entire pod shifted slightly, tilting maybe 2 degrees. Tommy grabbed the nearest handhold. The pod settled back with a metallic thunk. Sharks didn't bump things that hard unless they were trying to determine if something was food. Tommy moved back to the viewport. The shark had circled around and was approaching from the front, swimming straight at the pod. Its mouth opened slightly, showing rows of triangular teeth. The shark's snout touched the viewport glass. Tommy jerked back. The shark pressed harder, its nose flattening against the glass. The shark pulled away, circled once more, then disappeared into the darkness. The creaking stopped. Tommy waited, counting seconds. 10, 20, 30. The shark didn't come back. He checked the oxygen gauge. 2 hours, 39 minutes. His hands were still shaking. He told himself it was the hypothermia, the adrenaline crash, not fear. 22 years of deep water diving had taught him that fear was natural but useless. The beacon blinked its steady rhythm. Green, strong signal. Help was coming. Tommy just had to wait and keep breathing. Tommy pulled himself away from the viewport and focused on practical matters. When the rescue team arrived, they'd want to move fast. He should gather essentials, medical kit, water bottles, the beacon unit, make their job easier. He reached for the supply locker and his left arm spasmed. The muscles locked up, cramping so hard Tommy gasped. He grabbed his forearm with his right hand and tried to massage the cramp out. The muscle was rock hard. Stage 3 hypothermia could cause severe muscle cramping as blood flow returned. Tommy forced his fingers to work. kneading the cramped muscle. Slowly, the spasm released. His arm dropped to his side, weak and trembling. He'd lost maybe 20% of his grip strength. The oxygen gauge read 2 hours, 35 minutes. Tommy checked his dive computer. 8:21 a.m., 30 minutes since activating the beacon. Rescue would be gearing up now, running final checks. First, they'd confirm his location via the beacon signal. Check the depth reading, 900 feet. That meant specialized equipment, extended decompression stops. They'd bring extra oxygen tanks, medical supplies, thermal blankets. Tommy looked around the emergency pod. It was intact, fully functional. This would be a straightforward pickup. Dock the rescue submersible, equalize pressure, transfer him across. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Then begin the ascent. The temperature gauge read 30 degrees. His core temperature was probably close to 36 degrees, approaching normal. The shivering had mostly stopped. He could feel his toes, though they burned with pins and needles. Good signs, but his oxygen was still dropping. 2 hours, 33 minutes. Tommy did the math. Rescue arrival, approximately 90 minutes from now. His air would last 153 minutes at current consumption. That left 63 minutes of cushion, comfortable margin, unless something went wrong. He couldn't think like that. Had to trust his team. Patterson would send the best divers. Tommy opened another ration pack and forced himself to eat. His body needed fuel. The bar tasted like compressed sawdust, but he chewed and swallowed. Stay hydrated. Stay nourished. His left leg cramped suddenly. Tommy bit back a yell and grabbed his thigh. The muscle spasmed hard enough that he felt it through the pressure suit. He pressed his thumbs into the cramping muscle. The cramp released after 30 seconds, leaving his leg aching. This was getting worse. Tommy realized what was happening. His body temperature was rising, but the warming process itself was causing problems. As blood flow returned to his extremities, metabolic waste products were flooding back into his system. The medical kit had pain medication. Tommy found the packet, ibuprofen, 400 milligrams. He dry swallowed 2 pills. They wouldn't stop the cramping, but they'd help. The oxygen gauge read 2 hours, 31 minutes. Tommy lay back down, conserving energy. Moving around used oxygen and triggered more cramping. Better to stay still, keep breathing slow, wait for rescue. The pod hummed around him. Heating system, beacon transmitter, life support, all functioning perfectly. Tommy just had to do his part. Stay alive, stay conscious, stay calm. 900 feet of ocean pressed down from all sides, but the hull held. It was designed to hold. He closed his eyes and listened to his breathing. In, out, in, out. Each breath was a countdown. Each heartbeat brought him closer to rescue or closer to running out of air. Tommy thought about Sophie waiting for him in Singapore. She'd be finishing her morning classes right now, teaching geometry to 14-year-olds who didn't care about angles and theorems. She wouldn't know anything was wrong yet. Wouldn't know her husband was trapped 900 feet underwater, counting breaths, waiting for rescue that might not arrive in time. He'd promised her 20 years ago that he'd always come home. He'd kept that promise through hurricanes, equipment failures, close calls that should have killed him. He wasn't about to break it now. Tommy woke to the sound of motors. He hadn't realized he'd fallen asleep. Dangerous at this stage of hypothermia. His dive computer read 9:32 a.m. He'd been out for over an hour. The oxygen gauge showed 1 hour, 47 minutes remaining. The motor sound grew louder. Distinctive thruster noise. Tommy pulled himself up to the viewport. Through the darkness, he could see lights approaching. 2 bright beams cutting through the black water. Rescue. The submersible came into view. A 2-man rescue pod, painted bright orange with emergency markings. He could see 2 figures inside. One of them waved. Tommy waved back. The rescue submersible maneuvered carefully, approaching the emergency pod's external docking port. Tommy heard the magnetic clamps engage with a solid thunk. The submersible had docked. Tommy crawled to the docking hatch and waited. He could hear voices through the hull, muffled but human voices, real people. The docking port's pressure gauge started moving. Equalization in progress. 5 minutes to match pressure between the vessels. Tommy gathered his gear, the medical kit, the beacon unit, 2 water bottles. His hands fumbled. Fine motor control was still compromised. The pressure gauge reached equilibrium, 400 psi in both vessels. The docking hatch's indicator light turned green. The hatch swung inward, and a face appeared. A young woman in a pressure suit, maybe 30 years old, with short black hair. Tommy Chen. That's me. I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, Emergency Medical. We're getting you out of here. She climbed through, followed by a second diver. Male, older, built like a linebacker. This is Hank Reeves. He's piloting us back up. Hank nodded. Good to see you alive, Chen. Patterson's been losing his mind topside. Tommy tried to stand. His legs wouldn't cooperate. Dr. Kim caught him. Easy. You've got stage 3 hypothermia. We're going to move you slow. She pulled out a portable medical scanner and ran it over Tommy's chest. 35.8 degrees. You're almost normal, but your extremities are still compromised. Can you feel your feet? Barely. That's okay. We'll get you warmed up topside. Dr. Kim attached a portable oxygen tank to Tommy's suit. This is pure O2. It'll help clear your system. Tommy felt the fresh oxygen flowing. Cleaner, richer than the stale air he'd been breathing. His head cleared slightly. Hank moved to the docking port. We need to move, Sarah. Weather's turning topside. Copy that. Dr. Kim helped Tommy toward the hatch. His legs dragged. She and Hank basically carried him through the docking port and into the rescue submersible. The interior was cramped with 3 people, but it felt warm and safe. Hank sealed the hatch and moved to the pilot controls. Undocking now. Prepare for ascent. The magnetic clamps released. Tommy felt the submersible pull away from the emergency pod. Through the viewing dome, he watched the pod recede into darkness, the beacon still blinking its steady green pulse. Beginning ascent, Hank announced. 900 feet to surface. ETA 90 minutes with decompression stops. The submersible's thrusters engaged. Tommy felt the upward movement, subtle but definite. They were rising, leaving the darkness behind. Dr. Kim wrapped a thermal blanket around Tommy and checked his vital signs. You did good down there, Chen. Most people would have panicked. Tommy closed his eyes. I've had practice. The ascent was slow and methodical. Hank kept the submersible at a steady rate, 30 feet per minute, textbook protocol. Too fast and the nitrogen dissolved in Tommy's blood would form bubbles. The bends could kill him just as surely as running out of oxygen. At 700 feet, Hank brought the submersible to a complete stop. First decompression hold, 10 minutes. Tommy watched the depth gauge hold steady, still deep enough that the water outside was completely black, but they were moving in the right direction. Dr. Kim administered an IV drip. Warm saline solution. It'll help bring your core temperature up. She pulled out a tablet. I need to ask you some questions for the incident report. Can you walk me through what happened? Tommy described it. The fracture in the coupling, the decision to continue working, the catastrophic failure, the severed umbilical line, the short circuit, the swim through darkness. Every detail felt important. Dr. Kim took notes. When Tommy described swimming 40 feet at 900 feet depth with hypothermia setting in, she looked up. That should have killed you. The exertion alone combined with the cold and pressure, your heart should have stopped. It almost did, but it didn't. You've got the cardiovascular system of someone 20 years younger. Hank's voice cut in. Decompression hold complete. Resuming ascent. The submersible rose again. 650 feet. 600. 550. The water outside started to change. Not bright yet, but less absolute in its darkness. A deep blue-black instead of pure black. Light was penetrating from above. At 500 feet, they stopped again. Another hold, 15 minutes. Tommy watched the seconds tick by. Each minute felt like an hour. He was safe now, but his body still carried the tension of the past 3 hours. Dr. Kim noticed his shaking hands. Adrenaline crash. Completely normal. You've been in fight or flight mode for hours. Will it stop? Eventually. Give it time. Tommy thought about Marcus. There's a young diver on my crew. Marcus Webb. Can someone tell him I'm okay? Hank keyed his radio. Surface, this is Rescue 1. Request you inform Marcus Webb that Chen is stable and en route to surface. Patterson's voice crackled back. Copy that, Rescue One. Webb's standing right here. He wants to know if Tommy's really okay. Tommy leaned forward. Tell him I'm fine, and tell him that fracture wasn't his fault. Acknowledged? The hold ended. They rose again. 400 feet, 350, 300. The water outside was definitely blue now. Tommy could see particles suspended in the water, tiny organisms drifting. At 200 feet, the water was bright enough that Tommy could see the submersible's shadow on the water above them. Dr. Kim checked his oxygen saturation levels. Looking good. Heart rates stabilizing. 100 feet. The water was emerald green now, light streaming down invisible shafts. Tommy could see the surface, a shimmering boundary between water and air. 50 feet. 25. 10. The submersible broke the surface, and Tommy heard the most beautiful sound. Waves lapping against the hull, wind blowing across open water, Platform 7's machinery. They'd made it. Sunlight flooded the viewing dome. Tommy squinted against the brightness. Platform 7 loomed above them. The recovery crane was already swinging into position. Hank maneuvered them under the crane. Attaching lift cable now. Tommy felt the clunk as the cable connected. The crane's motor engaged, and the submersible rose out of the water. Through the dome, Tommy could see the platform deck. At least 20 people waiting. Medical team with a gurney. Patterson standing front and center. Marcus next to him. The crane lowered them onto the deck. The moment they touched down, the medical team swarmed the submersible. Hank opened the hatch and hands reached in, helping Tommy out. His legs buckled. 2 paramedics caught him and lowered him onto the gurney. Easy, Chen. We've got you. The lead paramedic started checking his vitals. Core temps 36.2. BP 90/60. He's stable, but we're taking him to medical. Patterson pushed through the crowd. Tommy. Jesus Christ, Tommy. I'm okay, boss. You short-circuited your own submersible. You swam 40 feet at 900 feet. Don't ever do that again. But Patterson was grinning, relief written all over his face. Deal. Marcus appeared at the gurney's side. The kid's eyes were red. Tommy, I should have caught that fracture. I should have. Stop. Tommy grabbed Marcus's arm. That fracture wasn't in the system. Engineering cleared it. This wasn't on you, you hear me? Marcus nodded. The paramedics wheeled Tommy toward the medical bay. In the medical bay, the staff went to work. They stripped off his pressure suit, wrapped him in heated blankets, adjusted the IV drip, connected monitoring equipment. His core temperature was rising steadily. 36.5 degrees, 36.8. Almost normal. The platform's doctor, Stevens, examined Tommy's hands and feet. No frostbite. That's remarkable. I kept moving, kept the blood flowing. Smart. Stevens made notes. We'll keep you here for observation for 12 hours. Decompression sickness can manifest hours after surfacing. Tommy nodded. He was too tired to argue. The adrenaline was completely gone, leaving him hollow and exhausted. Patterson appeared in the doorway. Chen, there's someone who wants to talk to you. He held up a satellite phone. Tommy took it. Tommy. Sophie's voice tight with controlled panic. Patterson just told me. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Cold and tired, but fine. Don't lie to me. I'm not, I promise. I'll be home in 3 days. Silence, then. You promised you'd always come home. You kept your promise. Always will. They talked for 10 more minutes, Sophie extracting every detail. When they finally hung up, Tommy handed the phone back to Patterson. She's going to kill me when I get home. Patterson laughed. Better than the alternative. The investigation would come later. The reports, the analysis, the questions. They'd examine Pod 7's wreckage, study the coupling failure, write new protocols. Tommy would cooperate fully, but right now, wrapped in heated blankets, watching the Indian Ocean through the window, he allowed himself to simply exist, alive, breathing, home. Marcus stuck his head in the door. Boss says I can sit with you, if that's okay. Tommy gestured to the chair. Pull up a seat, kid. Let me tell you about the day everything went wrong and how sometimes the only way out is through. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and share it. It helps the next person find their way here.